Up next, we have Danny Sheehan with us. And, of course, Danny, JD, is a graduate of Harvard Law School, former director of the Christic Institute, and is a professor of world politics at the University of California. He is also the general counsel and co-director for the Institute of Cooperation in Space. He has a long and distinguished history as public interest counsel and was legal counsel in the Pentagon Papers case, the Iran-Contra, 3 Mile Island, Karen Silkwood, and many other high-profile cases. He currently represents Lou Elizondo. We've got a lot to talk about tonight with Danny Sheehan, and I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, Daniel P. Sheehan. Danny, how are you tonight, young man?
I'm great, Jimmy. I'm great.
You look great. That's all that matters. That's all that matters, Danny. That's all that matters. And a couple of things. I know that you were just listening to Lou, and we'll get to Lou in a second. But I want to start off with this. Do you pay attention to the soap opera that is social media?
Actually, no. I've never. Our office is on Twitter and Facebook and other things. But myself, I've never been on them.
So
I haven't paid attention to them at all. I'm working. We used to say back in Washington D.C. when we were doing like the Iran-Contra case or the Silk case, we never have quite time to listen to all that kind of stuff because we're doing the stuff they're talking about.
That's
right.
You know what? And you're going to live a long life. You don't have to. You don't have to get involved with all of that. Well, moving on. We've got a lot to discuss tonight, and I kind of want to start here with everything that is going on right now with the IG and the Department of Defense and representing Lou Elizondo. Do you have an update on behalf of the IG and where this investigation is headed?
Sure. When you were talking with Lou, he had mentioned that we have been meeting with three specific subdivisions of the Inspector General's office in the Defense Department. We've been meeting with, of course, the whistleblower retaliation group because the instantaneous response of the Inspector General's office to the filing of our complaint on May 3rd was, oh, well, this sounds like a whistleblower is being retaliated against here. And then there was this other group that was called Space, Intelligence, and Engineering Oversight. There was another one that was Space, Missiles, and Nuclear Evaluation and Oversight. And now the same day that we filed this complaint right in the first thing in the morning at 9 o'clock in the morning on May 3rd. And later on that day, there was an official memorandum issued, a public press release from the Inspector General's office saying that, we have decided today, coincidentally, to start a major, broad investigation and evaluation to determine exactly what steps the Defense Department or any of its agencies have taken with regard to the UAP issue or the UFOs. Now, that's a very broad-ranging evaluation. And they also said in that press release, they said that they are going to consider expanding their investigation and the scope of it as it proceeds, and they will actually consider expanding the number of government agencies within the Defense Department that they're going to be evaluating. So we were happy to hear that. There was a fellow by the name of Randolph Strong, was the fellow who's the head of that division inside the Inspector General's office. So when we met with them in Washington, D.C., right down the street from the Pentagon, in the great big new Defense Department building, a series of buildings they have there, we raised the issue with them about, wouldn't it be more advantageous to have all of the subdivisions of the Inspector General's office rather than them each looking out of their little stovepipe, at Lou's general complaint, that they would all get together and form sort of a large task force and really come to grips with all the implications of this. And they have done that now. They have done that. And it's quite rare for that to go on inside the Defense Department. They're quite bureaucratic in the way they function. But we've said that this is such a profoundly important issue, and the American public is so interested in this thing. It's been going on for decades now. That what we wanted to do is have a collective group of people that we could sit down at the table with and have them around the table. There isn't any question. I mean, they all know, and as Lou pointed out, they acknowledged right flat out that there was absolutely no debate about the fact that Lou was the director of the Advanced Aerospace Sort Identification Program. That was just silly. Any assertions on the part of personnel from the Defense Department that Lou wasn't the director of the project, or that there was no project that was investigating UFOs, or they didn't know what anybody's talking about. They just said, look, let's get all that behind us right away, okay? Let's just brush that off the table. Everybody who's here knows that you ran the program, so let's talk about this, right? And so we had a whole range of issues that were raised. And what I was doing, I said to them, as Lou's counsel, because they know. I mean, when Lou retained me, Lou knew that I was the legal counsel for the Disclosure Project. He knew that I was legal counsel for Dr. John Mack at Harvard University when we went through an 18-month ordeal with the faculty and administration at Harvard University over them getting their nose out of joint over the fact that John Mack published
Lou,
a book about it.
Can you ask everybody that's eating dinner in the background to hold it down?
Yeah.
It's really loud. Okay, go ahead. Okay. Continue. John Mack.
Okay, so that Lou knew this when Lou retained me. And he knew that I was legal counsel for the citizens' hearings, the public hearings that we had with congressmen and senators and things, or former congressmen and former senators. So that the bottom line is that when I came to the Pentagon with Lou as his counsel, sitting at his side during these discussions, that we were there to basically assist the Inspector General's office in doing what was their constitutional duty. And you could tell that they weren't used to this. They were used to dealing with everything in these little compartmentalized stovepipes. And when we were saying, look, this is such a seriously profound issue that we've got to become serious about all this together. We need to work at getting at what's been done by the Defense Department. What do they know about this? Who is it that knows about it? Why is it that there are so many high-ranking military officials who don't know anything about this, who are not briefed in, and they're becoming totally frustrated? We need to figure out a protocol for getting this information gathered together in a coordinated way, and meaningful and honest evaluations being done. So that in a very short period of time, in these meetings that we were having, that it became extremely cordial. And it was perfectly clear that we were all sort of on the same wavelength here. And they clearly were looking to Lou to share with them the information that he had gotten as the director of the entire project. That's what he was doing. He was sharing with them the information because they had not been briefed in on any of it.
Now, help me. I want to be the fly on the wall here, Danny. Is UAP, UFO, little green men? Is this kind of stuff being discussed out in the open, or is it in references that are almost third person? We've got to get this information out. We've got to look at, instead of, is there direct reference to UAPs and UFOs?
Well, yeah, but so you need to be careful here because you threw in little green men.
Well,
along with the rest of it. Right? you got to be careful here.
Right.
We're going at this thing very carefully. The fact of the matter is that these unidentified aerial phenomenon that they refer to them as, everybody in the room knows that we're talking about UFOs. Okay, because UFOs moved from becoming a generalized description that was used by the United States military as unidentified flying objects. Everybody started that became a noun. They said, "Oh, that's a UFO."
Sure.
And there was a craft, a clear spacefaring craft, and that's clearly what we're talking about. And we're sitting around the table talking with these men about, look, we know that there are vehicles, and this is what Lou is saying to them. We know that there are vehicles flying in our airspace around the world on our planet that are going like 43,000 miles an hour right within our atmosphere. Now, this would burn any vehicle we've ever seen to a crisp. Here, and that's why, like with the Challengers coming in from going out to the moon or going in orbit, coming back into our atmosphere, they have to have these gigantic heat panels on them, and they have to slow down to really slower speeds in order to not get burnt to a crisp. But here, these vehicles flying at 43,000 miles an hour, at least inside our atmosphere, they're coming from 80,000 feet above our Earth down to within 50 feet of the surface of the oceans, and stopping on a dime that would generate up to 600 Gs that would tear any vehicle that we've ever heard of completely asunder. And then they're going underwater and traveling over 200 miles an hour under the water. Now, we've discussed all of this stuff. These are the things that Lou was able to discover in the period that he was running this major investigation inside the Pentagon. So he was briefing the people inside the Defense Department to make it clear to them, look how serious this issue is here. And for the people inside the Defense Department to be saying, look, nobody is working on this. Nobody's understanding this. These things are flying around and nobody's really paying much attention to them. Everybody knows it is crazy. It's just swamp gas. Or, it's lighthouse lights reflecting off clouds, or people are mistaking flocks of birds. I mean, look at the guy that does Cosmos, this Richard DeGrazio, whatever his name is.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, that's right. He was on Sunday morning. He was on with what's his name, Fareed Zakaria, right? And they were covering the Virgin everything's going up into the sky, right, with Richard
Branson,
right?
Yeah,
Branson, and they were all covering and what's the Fareed Zakaria said to him. He had him on the show, and he says, "What about all these sightings of the UFOs? And the Pentagon is recognizing they're real. What do you think about that?" He had the temerity to say, "Well, I really think it's probably some flaw in the equipment, the detection equipment." That's what he said. He is so locked in to refusing to acknowledge the reality of these things. I mean, we've got photographs of these things less than 100 feet away. I mean, we've got close. The guys that are flying these F-18 Hornets, they started taking their cameras with them and taking photographs of these things out the window of their cockpits. I mean, it's every single day they're seeing these things. So this is preposterous still for people to be taking this ridiculous position. And so the fact is that the guys that were in the Inspector General's office that are supposed to be conducting an evaluation of this whole subject didn't even know most of the public information that was already being released about this, because they wanted to approach the subject pristine. They didn't want to be prejudiced, so they had to have Lou start briefing them like right from the very beginning. So it's quite an extraordinary experience to see, these colonels from the Air Force and these DOD guys all sitting around this big table, and here's Lou, delivering a seminar to these guys about what the information is that he already knows about these things. And so that you could tell that these men, these were basically honest guys, and they started out with this extremely narrow perspective on what it is each of them was supposed to be doing. They wanted to remain inside these stovepipes where they were. But Randolph Strong brought them together and made them all sit down together, so they couldn't use the stovepipe defense anymore. They had to come to grips with this as a collective group. And so they were all there at the same time, and Lou is briefing them on what's going on. So now each of them knows that the other people at the table know as well, everything that they know. And so that we're sitting there giving them more sources, more people they can go to, where they can get the documents on things. For example, Lou said to them, and this isn't talking out of school, that the Defense Department, when people had filed Freedom of Information Act demands to get information to try to counter some of their public statements that Lou didn't have anything to do with this program. There wasn't any secret program. People filed Freedom of Information Act demands to see if they could get some of the records, and they said, the stuff that Lou Elizondo was working on was so insignificant that we've destroyed all of their records. And Lou said, anybody who believes that they've destroyed the records of the entire thing from the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification has got to have his head examined. So don't take that. Don't listen to them from inside. If anybody tries to tell you they've destroyed all of our records, we'll provide you copies if you'd like them.
Yeah, and what's the movement on that end with his missing emails and no backup to the email? Any response from the IG about that issue?
No, we're supposed to come and have another set of meetings with them within like 30 days. Okay, so we've laid out a whole bunch of stuff so that they can follow up on it and get the documentation. We've given them the names of witnesses. We've given them phone numbers. We've given all that stuff to them, and they're saying that they're going to have us come back to Washington, within 30 days or so to sit down for a second round, and we're going to keep on going. What we're trying to do is have this collective investigation that's going to be going on. To try to enlist the support of the Inspector General's office in calling to task some of these people inside the Defense Department that have been saying things that aren't true. Basically, it appears that some of the people inside the Defense Department didn't get the memo somehow that they're not supposed to keep on this complete bullshit line. That they've been going on for decades, and they've all sort of drunk the Kool-Aid that they're afraid to say anything about it. Nobody can talk about it. And the thing that's so bizarre about it is to have the United States Defense Department so intimidated that they can't even, a two-star general can't even ask anybody about the subject. They get them flying over a nuclear weapons site, like a Minuteman site, and they shut off all dozen of the nuclear missiles, and somehow the commander of the base is supposed to be frightened about even reporting it. I mean, how preposterous is that? And so this is the kind of conversations that we were having with them. We weren't being insulting to them, and we weren't trying to be insulting to the officers, the commanders of these bases. What we're saying is that this situation is absurd. And now that Lou and Chris Mellon had taken the position of bringing these three videos out and releasing them to the New York Times, and the board of editors of the New York Times were courageous enough to actually publish them, just like the Pentagon Papers, I was there for all those meetings as legal counsel for the New York Times when we decided to publish those papers. So here I could see what they were doing at the New York Times. You bring in videos of UFOs taken out of F-18 Hornet gunship, gun cameras. The New York Times isn't automatically just going to publish them. They're gonna make a lot of important decisions, and they're going to bring in Jim Goodell, their legal counsel, who might know all these guys, and they're going to sit down. But they decided to publish these. That makes it very important. In the same way, when the New York Times made the decision to publish the 47 volumes of the top secret Pentagon Papers and put it right on the front page of the New York Times, it was a major sea change in the war in Vietnam. It meant that the people in the established order had said it's time to bring this war to an end. What's happened now is the elements inside the Defense Department, Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, and other people like Steve Justice over at the Skunk Works. Others have come forward and are starting to say things like this. This is a, dare I say, a game changer. This is a game changer. And so the people inside the Inspector General's office are trying to figure out what it is that they're supposed to do now, in light of the fact that for years, decades literally, they've been functioning as part of the Defense Department that had this program to systematically deny the reality that they all knew was true, even to the point where their own officers wouldn't even ask questions about it or wouldn't file reports. So they have to now figure out how to redesign the protocols inside the Defense Department, inside each of the military services, and also inside the intelligence services, which the DOD Inspector General doesn't have any jurisdiction over. But the CIA has to figure out what to do about this. The DIA has to figure out what to do about this. The FBI has to figure out what to do about this. And Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, by the way, are sort of leading the way by saying, let us tell you candidly in sit-downs, face-to-face, what it is that we know about this and what it is that we know somebody else knows, but they're not sharing it with you, and they're not sharing it with us. This is terribly frustrating to have, major 2- or 3-star general officers ask questions about this and be told that they don't have a need to know, that they're not to be briefed in on this whole subject. Presidents of the United States, Jimmy Carter being told face to face by George H.W. Bush as the CIA director that he didn't have any need to know this. Obviously, Bill Clinton has said many of the same things. So that this is unacceptable in the constitutional order of a democracy. That our people have a right to know. I mean, that Lou is being very careful, and I'm working with him very carefully to make sure that he doesn't transgress any of his security clearances. But the reality is, as we had the long discussions in the Pentagon Papers, there's all kinds of overclassification that goes on. The utilization of the power to classify things has been misused consistently inside the Defense Department, inside the intelligence services, that they're constantly hiding things from the American people, arguing, well, we can't tell the American people because then our adversaries will know. I mean, they've got this whole mentality that they've got this adversarial relationship with the other nation states. And the reality is they have this attitude about it because they are the aggressor in many cases. They're the ones that invaded the Middle Eastern oil fields. They're the ones that invaded South Vietnam. They're the ones that are doing this. What we have to try to do is figure out how they can step back from that kind of aggressive posture that they've got and stop pretending that the national security of the United States requires them to exercise military force to seize and control the natural resources of the world on behalf of our corporations. They've got to change their headset about this. It's essential for the salvation of our whole planet. Because the UFO, the occupants of the UFO, to jump a bit, are constantly telling people, constantly communicating to people, you've got to stop these nuclear weapons. You've got to stop the explosion of these nuclear weapons. You have to stop polluting your entire planet with these fossil fuels. You're destroying the entire ecological system of your planet. That all the kind of communications that people are getting from their encounters with these UFOs have to do with this subject over and over again. Now, you can imagine sitting inside the Defense Department, right next to the Pentagon, across the table, talking with these men about these things. You can see that their eyes are getting big as saucers. They're starting to say, wait a second, I feel like I'm in a movie somewhere. That I'm being called upon to make moral decisions, that I'm being put in a situation of having to engage in heroic decisions that I need to make now to help save our planet, and to help deal with this, to keep the momentum of the military-industrial complex from, launching weapons into space to try to fight these extraterrestrial civilizations. This is an extraordinary moment in human history that we're at right now.
There's no question about that, Danny, and it is changing their mindset, right? It's a big job. Now, Danny, continuing our conversation, but I want to ask you this, and very directly, are we at a point in history, because you've been going up against the man in Washington, D.C. for decades now, are we at a point where we need to look at, I'm talking about the UFO community, are they our friend now? Are they on our side with disclosure and the ET question, or do we still need to proceed with caution?
Oh yeah, no. This is an existential process where there's some kind of a change is going on, and it's happening inside the bureaucracy right now, the defense establishment bureaucracy. But it's been caused It wasn't something that they, from an institutional point of view, appear to have made a decision to do something to start releasing a lot of information about this. Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, two guys, engaged in kind of this heroic action of getting these three videos declassified and bringing them out of the secrecy closet and brought them and put them on the front page of the New York Times. Were cautious enough in how they proceeded and responsible enough in how they proceeded to get the New York Times to agree to do it and to verify that these were the real deal. And so that I believe that triggered some kind of a process inside the establishment of trying to figure out what to do about that, because obviously some of the people inside the Defense Department were still lying. We're still doing the same old routine. We don't know what they're talking about. There's no such secret program. We don't know who Lou Elizondo is. And they're issuing these statements from the official corridors of the Defense Department. And then later on, other people in the Defense Department started saying, oh no, Lou Elizondo was definitely the director of the ATIP program. It was working on UFO stuff. And so that you began to get this kind of schism that started taking place publicly inside the defense establishment. And so that what we have to do now, those of us that have been in the UFO community since 1977, that we need to keep on moving forward. We need to keep on sharing information with the American public. We need to keep on asking questions. We need to keep on putting pressure on all of the different instrumentalities of government. We need to be putting pressure on the members of Congress to hold hearings on this. We need to be putting pressure on people inside the Defense Department to speak honestly and truthfully about this. We need to be cooperating with people who are cooperative, such as the people inside the Inspector General's office, who are genuinely puzzled about this subject and are trying to get information. And so we need to be cooperative and give them information. And that's why it's unique to have Lou Elizondo as the head of this investigative program inside the Pentagon, briefing them all now, and to have brought his legal counsel with him to sit right by his side, who they know is the legal counsel for the Disclosure Project, and that they know who I am, and so that when Lou and I are participating in meeting with these people, we're actually engaged in attempting to provide an opportunity for them as individuals, as individual human beings, to reach out and participate in this historic process that's going on right now. But as legal counsel, I can help advise them, that they don't need to get in trouble. They don't need to violate any security arrangements. They don't need to violate the security oaths, but they do need to do their job. And that they need to get some kind of a sense of understanding of what the constitutional responsibilities are of a democratic government when faced with this information, to stop pretending that somehow the mere acknowledgement that UFOs are real and that they appear to be coming from an extraterrestrial civilization is somehow damaging to the national security of the United States, because they've historically conflated the national security of the United States with the business interests of the major corporations in the United States. And, it's that old function that people think that what's good for General Motors is good for the country, and that somehow getting access to this information and squirreling it away in secret and providing it to our corporations so they can get kind of competitive advantage, not just militarily over our potential adversaries, but also from an economic point of view, that we can control the economy of the technologies that are involved in these UFOs. That's really what's going on here. And so that what we have to do is we have to have a very important change of attitude that needs to take place to start to get our defense establishment to be more honest and realistic about what the limited nature is of our true national security interests, and stop them from being driven unreflectingly into trying to protect the corporate interests of major financial interests that are trying to get a hold of this technology and monopolize it. That's an extraordinarily important thing that's happening here. So you get men like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and many others that look at this from inside and they say, wait a second, this is extraordinarily important information. This is extraordinarily important for our whole human family. This has profound philosophical and even theological implications for our whole family, and that they feel morally bound to do whatever it is they can do without violating their duties to maintain legitimate national security. But they're trying to figure out how they can get this information to the world, and that's part of. I'm privileged to be able to help counsel on that.
Well,
I think there's a difference in legitimate national security and non-legitimate assertions of national security.
And then the UAP task force report comes out, highly anticipated, but it didn't really address anything directly to any number of different groups out there. I think that I would like your opinion on this. I think the overreaching view of the report was, we know nothing. Well, they know a lot. And by stating that they know nothing about anything in the report on each segment of this, whether it's ET or adversarial or us, secret access programs, that it was none of the above. Very, very strange approach to this report, but they know a whole lot, don't they, Danny? Were you surprised at the emptiness of the report?
No, because you need to understand that once you know that there's going to be a classified annex, or basically an appendix to this short report, the public report, it's you got to understand this is over 400 pages.
Have you seen it? Have you seen the classified?
No.
You have not?
No, I have not. No, I have not. But it's over 400 pages, in that these 9 pages they released, there's really only 6 pages of any substance at all. So even the 9 pages isn't real. It's only 6 pages.
Did you just say it's over 400 pages? I thought the report was 78 pages. No. That's sort of a mythology that's arisen inside the UFO community. Okay.
I think it started actually with Steve Bassett. Steve was trying to get some sort of a general sense of how big it was, and he was trying to look at various sources that people who'd spoken with the New York Times and other things. But the reality is that those who have actually seen it know that it's 400 pages. And so there's a considerable amount of information that's in those 400 pages. But the 6 pages of substance that they actually revealed did say some things that are extremely important. If you read it very closely, that for example, they have said all kinds of people, they never mentioned extraterrestrial once.
No.
In the entire page, never. They never made all they have is the other box. There's this group of there's this other box where they put stuff into. And they even said they said that we aren't really able to determine anything about these things yet. And they've also covered themselves by saying, it was an extremely narrow group of sightings that we referred to. We only took a look at 144 of these. We were only able to define one of them. They had to get the old weather balloon in, and say that was a weather balloon. But the other 143 we looked at were only those that were military. They're only from a certain period of time that went from 2004 to 2019 or so. They've delimited the scope of what it is that they were doing.
That was me texting you, Danny.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that your phone was still on.
Oh, all right.
Danny and I are in a group text with a bunch of other people during the interview. Okay, so continue.
So the bottom line is that what they have said is that really 99% of anything of substance is going to go into the other box, this other box that they've got. And that's where the 400 pages really attempt to talk about all that. And it's absolutely clear. It's absolutely clear now that they know, even in the UAP task force, they know that even to whatever degree the United States has succeeded in recovering any of the downed craft, and to the extent to which they've succeeded in back engineering any of the technology, and there's a whole bunch of debate, as you know, going on about that's happening. But they point out that their position is clear that whatever number of highly sophisticated secret military technologies the United States have, the vast majority of even these 144 incidents that they looked at, the vast majority were not any of that technology. So they aren't saying, oh, we don't have any such technology, that we don't have anything like this. What they're saying is the ones we're talking about aren't those. And then what they tried to, at the beginning, they tried to suggest, well, it's possible that they are Russian or Chinese. It's not possible that they're Russian or Chinese. And Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and the others are shutting that down. They're saying that's ridiculous. Because if, in fact, the Chinese or the Russians had any technology like that goes 43,000 miles an hour in the atmosphere, and can go faster than the speed of light and go under the ocean at 200 miles an hour, if they had anything conceivably near that, that it would be the most colossal failure of intelligence in the history of human family for us not to know about it. And the fact is, we do know that isn't theirs. We know it's not theirs. Okay, so they've eliminated both of those. They've eliminated the vast majority of the instances are not our technology, whatever else might be going on with our technology, and they're not Chinese or Russian. So that leaves the other box. And this other box, they steadfastly refrain from speculating in any way about it. But the fact of the matter is, when Lou was interviewed by the Associated Press on May 4th, it was June 4th. When he was interviewed by the Associated Press on June 4th, he said the chances at all of these being Chinese or Russian is so infinitesimally small that it's basically functionally eliminated. And once you eliminate those things, they said to him, the AP guy said to him, Dan Huff, one of the guys, he said, there were 3 AP guys interviewing him. And he said, well, what are you guys considering? What were you inside the ATIP? What were you looking at? And Lou was quite candid. He said, well, the primary theory that we're looking at is that they're extraterrestrial, that they've come from an extraterrestrial civilization. And then he actually said, and it's possible that they may even be extra-dimensional, because it's quite clear that whatever the method of transit is that they use, from coming from a different star system to coming to our planet, it gives the appearance of being extra-dimensional, that they kind of materialize out of another dimension.
Right.
And they just appear and disappear. So some people are suspecting that they may be just entirely from another dimension. But whichever of those is true, you're dealing with a reality that 99% of the evidence that's coming in indicates that they're extraterrestrial. And you made reference to the Eric Davis quote right in the New York Times, where he acknowledged, in the New York Times chose to publish it, that he said that he had briefed the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee, and that he and his colleagues, most of them, believe that these are other off-world vehicles. That was his phrase. These are off-world vehicles, and so that's an extraordinary concession, not only on the part of Eric Davis, but it's on the part of the New York Times to publish a thing like that. So the reality is, and I said this when we were sitting talking to the Inspector General, I said, look, you guys can spend a whole lot of time if you want trying to figure out how fast these things go, what their propulsion system is, how they can handle 600 Gs. But the reality is, what you're going to have to come to grips with is, who is flying these things? Who is flying these things, and where do they come from, and what's their agenda here? How long can you pretend that that's not what the issue is that's here? Someone materializes in your living room, and you're wondering what kind of shoes they've got on, and you're saying, no, look, that's not the issue here. Where do these people come from, and what are they up to, and what kind of an extraordinary civilization do they represent? And of course, all these guys in the Defense Department are saying to themselves, wow, this is way above our pay grade, way above our pay grade. But what we're saying is, figure out what is within your pay grade. Figure out what is within your pay grade and do that job. because doing your job here within your pay grade is going to contribute to everybody else being freed up to do their job inside their pay grades. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to push it into the Congress. We've got to push it into the President's office. We've got to push it all the way up to the Secretary of Defense's office. We've got to get everybody doing their constitutional duty about this subject right now.
I wanted to, before the break, I wanted to ask you about this, I'm going to do air quotes here, Danny, the 23-minute UAP UFO video that everybody is talking about. I'm going to ask you directly. Have you seen it?
No.
Would you tell me if you have? Would you tell me if you did? Okay.
Oh yeah, no. See, that's one of the things they're engaged now in trying to figure out is what is it they can say in my presence. I won't tell everybody, and that's what they're saying. And so and I've said to them before. I said, look, despite my entire history of record, of confronting injustices inside the executive branch and inside the government, I said, the fact of the matter is, I believe that there is such a thing as genuine security interests for our human family, for our planet, for a given nation state. I understand what their jobs are. I'm not trying to rub their nose in it. What I'm saying is, you need to confine yourself to the constitutionally authorized authority to keep certain things secret, not expand it out all. There's no conceivable, legitimate national security reason why they can't acknowledge that the UFOs are real, that they believe that the UFOs appear to come from an extraterrestrial civilization, and that we are devoted, our country and our human family and all of our nation states together are devoted to figuring out who these people are. And extremely importantly, we're devoted to figuring out who is it among us that already know this, and why are they keeping it secret, and to whose advantage is it keeping this thing secret, and what are they trying to do by owning and monopolizing this information and trying to figure out how to turn it into their own private benefit and not sharing it with our human family. Well, we're here faced with the potential global climate change and burning fossil fuels. We've still got nuclear waste materials from 103 nuclear power plants just in our own country. We got Fukushima pouring radioactive waste into the Pacific Ocean. We've got another 200 such facilities all around our planet, all within 1 mile of the seashores. And the global climate change is raising the levels of the sea. We're looking at potentially hundreds of Fukushimas pouring radioactive material into our ocean, and yet there's a group of people, human beings in our human family, who are monopolizing this information and concealing it from us and using the ruse of it being national security that doesn't allow us to talk about this.
Yeah, glow in the dark sushi. It is in our future. It's in our future. I wanted to ask you really quick, who is Randolph Strong? He's a ghost. I can't find any information out about this guy. Who is he?
Oh, Harvey's a really great guy.
Is it Harvey Strong or Randolph Strong?
It's Randolph is his official name, Randolph Strong. But Harvey is his nickname, his kind of nom de guerre, if you will.
Okay.
But the bottom line, he is the project manager of the division of the Inspector General's office in charge of space, intelligence, and engineering oversight. He is the one who issued the public memorandum on May 3rd. Later in the day, after Lou and I filed his major complaint with the Defense Department about what they were doing and how they were mishandling this entire subject. So he came forward, and he's the one that made bold to call for this much more far-reaching evaluation inside the Inspector General's office. And he's a very strong character. He's as far as I can tell, is a decent, honest guy. Most of the people that are locked out of the government circles, have developed a very intense suspicion about our government structures. And I must say, I think I gave them some of that idea, over the last 50 years. And I think, a constitutional scholar is trained that the underlying assumption of our constitutional government is to distrust government structures unless they prove to you that they are to be relied upon. You challenge them, you ask them questions, you hold them to their constitutional duty, and nobody inside government likes that. It makes their job harder, they think. But that's what the Constitution is about. That's what democracy is about. And in this particular instance, this is the most important single subject possibly confronting our entire human family right now. And it touches directly upon the other major questions that we all know about global climate change, potential thermonuclear self-destruction, and the contamination through the nuclear power plants of our entire ecosystem. These are crucial challenges that our human family has generated for ourselves, and there is some tiny minority of our human family who are keeping this information secret, and they're doing it for their own advantage. They're trying to figure out how they can capitalize on it, how they can make money on it, how they can control this technology and continue to establish the hegemony of the United States nation state over all the other countries of our planet. This is not a constitutionally acceptable activity on their part. And we need, as constitutionalists and people who believe in democracy, to take this over. Not to generate complete anarchy. We're not saying, here, open up the doors of the Pentagon and show us how to all make a hydrogen bomb. We're not talking about that stuff. We're talking about acknowledging the most important single subject that our human family is confronted. It has vast implications for our theological view of the world, our human worldview of how we fit into the entire fabric of our universe. And to have people stealing this information and using the color of authority of our United States governmental institutions to secrete this information and keep it for themselves in some corporate boardrooms somewhere, is totally unacceptable. And I think a lot of it is what offended Lou. I think I can't speak for Chris as much, but I think it has offended them. It's offended them as patriots. It's offended them as Americans to see this being done. Because it's clear that up until this point in time, even though there's technical things that the UFOs are doing, it's clear that they're flying around in quote, our airspace without permission from our national security state officials. Yeah, right. But and it is true. To be a little more serious, for them to shut off our nuclear missiles, that threatens those who believe that we ought to have nuclear missiles that we can use to back up our invasion of other countries of the world. And if they resist us, we can nuke them. This is a horrible idea. And it's only been around since the first nuclear explosion was 100 days after I was born. This is on our watch. The creation of these nuclear weapons and the utilization of them to back, unjust corporate power in our United States over the entire world, and to threaten other people around the world with destroying their civilian population. When I was legal counsel with the Jesuit Order in Washington, D.C., in their National Social Ministry office, we got the Catholic Church and the United Board of Homeland Ministries of the Methodist Church to declare the mere possession of nuclear weapons to be a mortal sin, because they're inherently designed to destroy the civilian population, and that is in violation of every single concept of fair warfare, of the just war theory. And we declared that. The bishops of the Catholic Church have declared that, and it's true. And so we have an obligation, same thing that most of the people who encounter UFO beings, the actual beings who are piloting these things, who are asking us to do something to get rid of these nuclear missiles for our own self-preservation. We've got to do that. We've got to start listening now. We've got to get past the fixation on how fast do they go, how many G's do they pull, what's their propulsion system. We've got to come to grips with what is the implication of this. What is the implication of an entire civilization existing outside of our planet's domain, in which we find ourselves. And we need to start addressing that. And we cannot sit around waiting for the government to tell us what to do, nor can we sit around and wait for the churches to tell us what to do. We as citizens of the world and as members of our human family need to do this ourselves. And this courageous people like Lou and Chris and Eric and these other people that are coming out from inside that set of institutions and starting to do the courageous work to get this conversation going.
I wanted to ask you this. Let's go direct. Is it time, Danny? You and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago in private. And your beautiful wife was there, and she was going, "Yes, Jimmy." Is this time for the disclosure movement to gather at the Lincoln Memorial? Is this time for us to? All of the great changes throughout history happened. The start of it was always right there at the Lincoln Memorial. Is it time for us to think about organizing something?
Well, I think that the most important thing for us to organize is the direct contact experience, is for us to have training for people to figure out how to gather together and gather at each other's homes and go out in your backyard and reach out telepathically to the beings. There's other things. I mean, I know this isn't speaking as Lou's lawyer or speaking on behalf of any of the other fellows in the military, but I think that what we have to do is we have to have a direct citizen diplomacy program, that we have to reach out to try to establish direct communications with the beings, because the reality is that the existence of this extraterrestrial civilization, where they come from, what their agenda is, it's going to tend to be concealed until they decide how much of it they want made public. And so that I think that we have that when back when I was at Jesuit headquarters, I had Jimmy Garrison, my deputy that was in charge of the nuclear weapons policy, go to Russia, and he ended up meeting directly with Gorbachev back when Gorbachev was just the Secretary of Agriculture, and started talking about how we can work all together to disassemble the nuclear warheads of both of their countries, and to get China to join in with this as well, and others. This is how we ended up. This is part of the process that went on to get Gorbachev to declare glasnost and perestroika, and to decide to step back. He didn't decide to step back from the Cold War because of some diplomatic stuff that was done on the part of our government, threatening him, or it's totally crap to say, oh, well, the Reagan administration decided they were going to do Star Wars and it scared Russia, so they all decided to quit in the Cold War struggle. That's not true at all. This was citizen-to-citizen diplomacy that went on over years of reaching out and having conversations with them, talking with people through the churches and the synagogues. And this is the way to do this thing, that we have to stop relying upon some elite governing class to govern us.
Well, don't we? But don't we go visible? Don't we put pressure on this elite group, who I want to talk about with you, by the way? You've made some very good points about this lately. But I'm talking about 500,000, 1 million people, a disclosure movement in Washington to put pressure on our elected officials that we are serious about this and we need movement. And having something visible like that may be the next step. I'm being very serious about this, Danny.
Sure, I know you are. No, I believe that everybody should do everything that we can think of to try to do this. The difficulty is that is assuming that we have to rely upon pressuring these people to do something they don't otherwise want to do. And that somehow you're going to put 500,000 people in the street and march up and down the streets and get, that has its own role. I've done those things. When Orlando Letelier was murdered by the DINA, by the secret police of Chile, a block from my office, I helped work and organize a massive march that went from the Chilean embassy all the way to the funeral at the church of St. Matthew's. One of my best friends, a Catholic priest, Jesuit, who was my superior, celebrated the funeral mass for them. We had diplomats lining the walls. We had Joan Baez singing Ave Maria. We had, we were doing everything to try to force the revelation of the fact that it was the DINA that were involved in assassinating Orlando Letelier, the ambassador from Chile to the United States. And we ended up succeeding eventually. It took years and years and years and years of pressuring the government. And the problem is that the ruling class, the ruling elite that fill in these government positions around the world, they have their own agenda. And that it is not to do what is in the best interest of the people. It's to do with what is in the best interest of them and their fellow people. And so that just marching up and down the street doesn't really persuade them. The reality is, and I'm certainly not as a public justice lawyer dismissing the importance of those things. Those are all important. Every single one of us should do whatever it is that she or he is capable of doing. And organizing people to engage in these mass demonstrations is a part of what needs to be done. I agree with you. What I'm saying is that there also has to be this extremely important thing that to demonstrate to the people in positions of power that we're not going to wait for them to reveal this to us, that we're going to reach out to do everything we can do to establish direct contact with these extraterrestrial beings. And I mean, even to the point of sometimes they suggest they're going to bring Logan Act charges against people for attempting to have diplomatic relations with a foreign power. I mean, they certainly can't do that for someone they don't even acknowledge exists. So it isn't likely. And if anybody gets charged with the Logan Act violation, I'll defend them for free. I can tell you, and it would be a great opportunity to get in front of an American jury and to call the witnesses from the government to deal with this issue. So they're not likely to throw us into that briar patch. So I think, yes, that we should have major demonstrations. I think we should have, but very importantly, a direct citizens initiative, a citizens diplomatic initiative to go forward under the CE5 and get everybody involved. Stephen Greer has been helping to train people to do this. Mark Sims is working on it now. We're talking about setting up a virtual New Paradigm Institute to invite people from around the world to come and sit virtually around the table to have this set of discussions among our citizenry about what to do about this. The Catholic Church, back in November of 2009, on November 11th of 2009, issued a public call calling upon the people of the world to start to have this profoundly serious discussion about the important philosophical and theological questions that are presented to our human family by the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. And in my capacity as the legal counsel of the Jesuit office, I reached out immediately to Father Jose Gabriel Funes, who was the director of the Pontifical Observatory in Rome at Castel Gandolfo, who actually issued the public statement on behalf of the church. And within 48 hours, I was sitting talking to him about this. And he admitted to me in the first 2 minutes I was talking to him that he wasn't talking about microcellular life discovered under some frozen lake on a distant moon somewhere. He's talking about another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but categorically non-human species elsewhere in our galaxy. There's a full-scale, sophisticated civilization here. And the time has come for us to come to grips with this reality. And that we have to show that we're worthy of this. We can't sit back and wait for, democracy is not a spectator sport. We're all trained to sit and watching the Bucks, play the Phoenix Suns, or watching the Dallas Cowboys, play the Boston Patriots or the New England Patriots. And we're all trapped in these kind of passive observations. We need to participate in this process, and participating includes getting in the streets. Participating includes leaning on our government representatives, leaning on them to have public hearings about this. It means people who run a radio show like this of yours, bringing people on to talk about this, and getting people to send in their questions for all of us to answer, to have this be open and transparent process. And in this new thing, the New Paradigm Academy, this virtual or New Paradigm Institute, this virtual institute is going to bring on all the new technology that's going to enable people to come together, as I said, sitting around a table and talking with world leaders around the world and civilians all around the world who know about this, and people can come and participate in this. Everybody can have their own little, what do they call them?
Avatar.
Avatars, that's right, their little avatar. And Mark Sims is going to be financing the technology of this platform, so that the avatars are going to look virtually just exactly like a person.
I've seen your avatar. I've seen your avatar. It looks exactly like you.
No, but that's a little primitive. Those things. This is going to be really sophisticated. You basically aren't going to be able to tell the difference between an avatar and an actual visual of the person. This is, and you're going to be sitting around you can sit around the table and talk to Albert Einstein. You can sit around the table and talk to Plato. I got to say one more thing. That he has figured out a way he can program the avatar with all of the knowledge of the person whose avatar that is. And just like you're talking to Siri on the telephone, you say, Siri, tell me who were the people that were on the Nino, the Pinto, and the Santa Maria. And within 30 seconds, she'll start telling you who they all are, right? Because it's all filed away. It's all by technology. That can be done now for every major person who's participating in this. Government people, you can program through AI the information that they have, and so you can actually sit at the table and you can convene them to come and sit at the table to talk about this most profound of all questions that our human families ever confronted. And we can participate in this. Regular people can come and sit at the table and have these conversations. This technology of the New Paradigm Institute that Mark Sims is getting set to finance and put together is going to be extraordinarily important for housing and facilitating this conversation that's going to be going on. And so that I just want everybody to know that we don't have to depend solely upon filling the streets of Washington, D.C. with 500,000 people and marching on the Capitol building. What we've got to do is we've got to work together to go out in the meadows and the fields of our country and reach out together through meditation and certain techniques. That Stephen Greer has a whole training program to help show people how to do this. Mark Sims and the people at the New Paradigm Institute are going to be training people on how to do this. And we have to train an entire generation of diplomats. We have to have citizen diplomats that are going to be trained to be, what are you going to do? It's like the dog that catches the car, right? You go out in the middle of a field and say, oh, please come down and talk to us. And they land a flying saucer there. And what are you going to say to them? You're going to say, oh, well, like Betty Hill said, I don't know this, but I can send you to somebody. We need to be able to know what to say and what we're going to be proposing for policies here.
Well, this time around, instead of Joan Baez, we're going to have the Foo Fighters. I'm just letting it. But Danny, yes. I have to ask you: if the pressure and everything that you and this community is doing right now, and we continue this, and suddenly our government reveals that they do have in their possession, crashed and retrieved flying saucers. Is the world ready for that? That kind of confirmation? Is the world going to be able to handle this?
Well, that's part of we are the world. I mean, we need to prepare ourselves for this reality. Whatever the means are, and whatever the rate at which this information is acknowledged, both by our government institutions and by the ET civilization itself, by institutions such as the churches, etc., that we need to prepare ourselves for this information, so that no matter how slowly they do this, the institutions, or how rapidly they do that, we as people are responsible for this. It's like with your own children. How aggressively are you going to train your children about some of the realities of the outside world? You just have to do that. You can't just throw them outdoors and say, here, figure out what it looks like in the outside world. There's a whole educational process, and we need to do that. Now, a lot of people, of course, speculate that the government institutions and the ruling elite have been doing this over the past 75 years, that they've been feathering this information in. I mean, you take the average 7-year-old here in the United States and ask them to draw an extraterrestrial, and they'll draw it for you. You know, with the big eyes and the big head, and you say, here, draw a flying saucer, and they'll draw you a flying saucer. So it's clear that there's been a process going on over all these years to try to feather this information in. But at the same time, the governing elite have been holding back the key information about the technologies, in that they've been making us, suffer the consequences of our own ignorance. But we've been victimized. We're being taken advantage of by a tiny, tiny minority of people on our planet who believe that they are in charge and that they have a right to monopolize the technology. The same kind of people that rose to power back in the robber baron era, from 1868 at the end of the American Civil War to 1898, a short 30-year period there. There were like 24 families that rose to immense, fabulous wealth by monopolizing the steel production, the iron, the railways, the shipping lines, the telegraphs, the communications, the agribusiness. These 24 families came to own and monopolize virtually all the major sectors of our economy. And so the fact is they haven't let go since then. And they're involved in controlling this information. They're holding it for themselves, and they're letting us all suffer the consequences. So rather than getting into a confrontational fight with them, or relying solely upon mobilizing more and more people marching in the streets of Washington, D.C. to try to frighten them into thinking they're going to lose control somehow over the population, we've got to take it into our own power. We've got to reach out, establish direct citizen diplomacy with the extraterrestrial beings, come to understand whatever the reticence is that they have for revealing themselves, get them to share this information with us as to why they're not coming forward and making it obvious so that we can take that into account. We don't want to shock the conscience of the citizens of the world, and we don't want to traumatize our people. We don't want our people to be, suddenly faced with the realization that their whole worldview has been wrong, and in despair over this. We want to do this in a responsible way, but we need to have the information. We need to know what the information is that's being sequestered by certain elements high up in the corporate structures of our country that have pirated this information from the government and are holding it in their own private corporate hands. We've got to be able to get at this, and we've known this for some time now, that this element exists, and that
if you were
what to do about it.
If you were going to, and I've recently heard you speak about the small elite group. Is it an extension of those families? Is it a new generation? Are we speaking purely in a private? A corporate and banking structure that is independent of state actors?
Well, it would have been, but for their having taken over the instrumentalities of government. That's what happened back during the robber baron era. Is they basically applied their talents and obtained economic control over the economic resources. And then they translated that into capturing the institutions of government itself, to the point where they would be able to dictate sending foreign expeditionary forces, for example, into Nicaragua to overthrow the government down there because the United Fruit Corporation, wanted to use that to grow bananas down there. The same way that they invaded and overthrew the government of Mossadegh over in Iran because they wanted to have the oil. The Central Intelligence Agency is playing a major key role in this. The Central Intelligence Agency that was created in 1947 through the National Security Act of 1947 has been steadfastly dedicated to plying their trade on behalf of the American corporations and getting access to the resources of other countries around the world, and toppling governments that don't agree to give us unfettered access to their resources, etc. As of all the instrumentalities, the Central Intelligence Agency is a fundamentally and profoundly corrupt organization. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't good people that don't know any better that are in it, and trying to figure out what they can do to help. But the reality is that the first memos that were written suggesting to President Truman that there be such an organization was written by Robert Lovett. Robert Lovett was a senior partner in Brown Brothers Harriman. Brown Brothers Harriman was a private investment firm that was made up of the heads of these families. And the CEO of that was George Herbert Walker. And the legal counsel for that was Allen Dulles. And he ended up being made the first civilian head of the Central Intelligence Agency. But his power came from the fact that he was legal counsel for Brown Brothers Harriman. He was the consigliere for these families, and that the CIA was steadfastly devoted to pursuing it. You can take a look, for example, that David Talbot wrote this extraordinarily important book. It's called Allen Dulles, The Rise and Fall of the Secret American Government. This is not unknown, this information. The question is, how do we who have had the advantage of getting a full scholarship to Harvard College, for example, and Harvard Law School, and getting to study all of this stuff among the elite and the major prep school people, come out to the world and say, let me tell you what I've discovered here. Let me tell you what I found out. That they're trying to recruit us from the working class to join with them and share in their privilege. And we've said no, and we want to tell people what we really discovered about how these secret powers operate. And they're operating here in this area with regard to the UFOs, in the technology that they represent, and the good people like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and Eric Davis and the other people who are offended by what's going on here are trying to figure out how they can participate in getting this information made available to the people of the world. It doesn't really transgress any legitimate national security interest of our country, and that's the key to this thing. And again, I don't mean to speak just on behalf of Lou or Chris or any of the other people. They can speak for themselves on this, but I think you can tell that that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out how they, caught in this extraordinary moment of history, can fulfill their moral responsibilities, not only to their fellow citizens here right now, but to their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren. This is something that's going to affect our relationship with the extraterrestrial civilization for thousands of years to come. I mean, that's the importance of this particular moment, that we're engaged in right now. This is trans-historical, what's happening right now, and it has to be handled well.
Thank you so much, Danny. What a great conversation, and you've had a very, very busy year, certainly a very busy couple of weeks, and it's not going to get any easier. But thank you, man, for rolling that rock uphill, man. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute privilege to get to be here at this time.
Your true words have never been spoken. Danny Sheehan, thank you so much, my friend, and we'll be speaking very soon. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.